This is a Haval H6GT Ultra, and you seem to see more and more of these around these days. So why is this mid-size SUV so popular? My name's Nish, and you're watching The Word on Cars. Let me show you. So, for anyone that hasn't heard of Haval, it's part of Great Wall Motor or GWM and specializes in SUVs. Now, GWM hasn't been around all that long. It was established in 1984, but they're among the top 10 largest manufacturers in China and had 1.2 million sales globally, which was a 15% year-on-year growth last year. Needless to say, they're gaining popularity around the world, which goes to my point that we're seeing more and more of their product on the road. And the simple answer on why that is comes down to one thing: price. This H6GT Ultra, which is now the top spec model, and I say now because there was a H6GT Lux, which no longer exists, costs around 46,000 Australian dollars drive away. This one's finished in Atlantis Blue premium paint that costs $495. Hamilton White is the only no-cost color option, which is mind-blowing when you consider everything you get with this mid-size SUV compared to rivals like the Toyota RAV4 Edge and Hyundai Tucson Premium N-Line that'll set you back over 62 grand. You can bag an even better deal on the second-hand market with H6GT Ultras like this one, which is for sale at Blinker here in Melbourne, for a touch under 38 grand. And if you do find yourself looking at this H6GT at Blinker, remember to let them know you saw this one on The Word on Cars for an additional 3-year warranty on top of the remaining factory warranty, which makes this one hell of a deal. Even though the H6GT is cheaper than its competition, it's certainly not lacking when it comes to looks. Now, don't shoot me down for saying this, but it's got Lamborghini Urus vibes with its sharp lines and sloping coupe rear end. Up front, you have attractive LED headlamps with daytime running lights that sit on either side of a slim, non-functional air intake and a large grille with more non-functional intakes on either side, mixed in with fake carbon fiber trim across the bumper for an aggressive and sporty front end. Over on the side, the H6GT rolls around on blacked out 19-inch wheels and even has integrated fins at the bottoms of the rear doors to amp up the sportiness, while the back end is just as sporty and aggressive as the front, with not just one, but 2 spoilers on the roof and tailgate, good-looking LED tail lamps with a distinctive daytime running light signature, and a bumper bar that wraps into what's supposed to look like a diffuser with these fake exhaust tips. I'll never understand why manufacturers just keep throwing these in. I mean, does it really cost that much to cut a hole and make these functional? Anyway, while we're talking exhaust, have a listen to this. Not bad, right? I wasn't expecting this to have a bimodal exhaust, so that was a nice little surprise. Overall, and aside from the fake exhaust tips, the styling of the H6GT definitely lives up to what Haval describes as a striking coupe. Now, before we talk about the interior, getting in is as easy as one would expect. You have smart keyless entry, so grab the handle of the H6GT and the doors unlock. You can also use the key fob, which, considering the price of this thing, looks and feels quite nice, with the usual functions and a panic button for emergencies to set the alarm off, which you don't see too often these days, but a great little feature. The front doors also feel quite solid and weighty and open up plenty wide to make getting in and out easy. Once you do step inside, you're going to find yourself surprised by this interior because it's actually quite stylish. Haval has taken a more simplistic approach in here. It's modern, ergonomic, bright, and feels open and spacious thanks to the panoramic roof that sits over you. The front half tilts and slides to air the interior as well. There's soft touch surfaces, this carbon fiber looking material that's also soft and squishy, suede look inserts, exposed stitching, shadow chrome trimming, and artificial leather. Considering the price of this thing, it's quite impressive how nice the interior looks and feels. Even the plastics in here don't look or feel cheap. You could quite easily confuse yourself into thinking you're sitting in something a little more exy. And being a sports SUV, there's seats that definitely look the part wrapped in artificial leather, the same carbon fiber material, and suede look inserts along with embossed GT logos on the backrests, which are well padded and supportive. They're surprisingly comfortable. Haval has also made sure that there's enough space in here for most. I'm 5'9" tall, and there's plenty of space for my head, legs, and even knees. The steering wheel does have tilt and reach adjustments, so even if you're taller, you won't have any issues fitting in here. There's also quite an impressive level of tech in here, starting with this high resolution 12.3-inch touchscreen, which gives you access to everything you need at your fingertips. Navigation though is only accessible through wired Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. The interface looks modern, it responds quickly, you can see multiple sources of information at the same time thanks to these side-by-side tiles, and you can even swipe down to pull up a quick access screen, just like you can on a smartphone these days, with customizable shortcuts to pretty much all of the functions you'd expect to see, including the drive modes to switch between normal, sport, eco, snow, race and off-road modes, and the steering modes to switch between comfort, sport and light modes. If you're wondering what this TOD button does, it turns off all devices and does the same thing as a power button on the bank of buttons under the screen. Haval didn't get the memo about adding a volume knob though, so the passenger will need to use the quick access screen for that, which is a little annoying because it's a two-step process, but you do get used to it. Most of the climate controls have also been integrated into the screen, including the heated and ventilated front seats and the heated steering wheel, but you do get a few physical climate control buttons under the screen. It's not the most intuitive system when you start going deeper into the system settings, but again, you do get used to it. I found it easy enough. Oh, and there's also an 8-speaker stereo that gets a couple of aluminium speaker grills up front and sounds much better than what you'd expect in an SUV at this price point. Driver assistance is also integrated into the infotainment screen, and there's a lot of it. There's adaptive cruise control with stop and go, lane keeping and centering, blind spot monitoring, forward and rear emergency braking, including rear cross-traffic braking, and a 360-degree surround view camera system, which is brilliant, with not only multiple camera views with active grid lines, but also a 3D view. The system will even switch angles depending on your proximity to an object to give you the best possible view, and there's automatic parking to top it all off. In a 46 grand SUV, that's just mind-blowing. While we're on the topic of screens, the H6GT also gets a 10.25-inch instrument cluster, which, like the infotainment screen, is high resolution, looks modern, and sits up like a tablet in front of the driver. The screen is controlled through buttons on the steering wheel with all the usual information and a different view in race mode. In all other drive modes, there's this beautiful background of the H6GT looking like it's warp speeding into space. Looks awesome. Haval hasn't stopped there though. This thing also gets a heads-up display that keeps up with the competition in terms of what it shows and how well it works. Information-wise, there's driver assistance, navigation, phone and audio information in your line of sight, and you can even customize the information you see in front of you based on the drive mode you're in, which is a handy feature when you want less information getting in the way of your line of sight. Then there's the center console where you'll find the gear selector for the H6GT. Now, I'm not a huge fan of these rotary gear selectors, but I'm going to forgive this one because it looks like a centerpiece for the console. It's just beautifully crafted and it feels just as nice when you twist the dial to switch between reverse, neutral and drive with a button on top for park. You'll also find the electric parking brake and auto hold buttons on the center console, along with the wireless charger for phones, a small storage space and a larger storage space with a trick divider that pops out when you need cup holders. And while we're on storage, the H6GT gets a floating center console, so there's space under it where you'll find a 12-volt power outlet on the driver's side and USB ports on either side. I wasn't sure about the placement of those when I first stepped in, to be honest, but they're actually well placed and easy to access. There's also a large storage bin under the center armrest, a good-sized glove box on the dash, door bins with bottle holders for both driver and passenger, more storage in the driver's footwell, and a sunglass holder on the ceiling console. So, plenty of storage in this mid-size SUV. That covers the front. Time to jump into the back seats and see what we have there. Firstly, getting in. Like the front doors, the back doors also feel solid, which is crazy considering how much this SUV costs. I feel like I've said that quite a few times throughout this video, but it's true. Anyway, the doors also open up to give passengers enough space to get in and out of the back seats. And when you do park your bottom back here, there's also more space than I expected, with loads of headroom, legroom to literally stretch yourself out, and knee room with the driver's seat set to my driving position. You can also get 3 adult passengers in the back seats, but be warned, you might be too close for comfort. There's also a low hump on the floor, but you can easily park your feet on it, so it's really not obtrusive. The H6GT also gets ISOFIX points for the outboard seats and top tether mounts across all seats for baby or booster seats for the young families out there. Back here, you'll also find the same materials throughout, including embossed GT logos on the backrests of the seats, which is a nice little touch. Rear passengers also get vents for heating and cooling, and a couple of USB ports on the center console, map pockets behind both front seats, door bins in both rear doors, no bottle holders though, cup holders in the center armrest, and even reading lights on either side. Overall, it's a really well thought out back seat. When it comes to the cargo area, there's an electric tailgate with hands-free operation to get in. And space-wise, there's 392 litres back here, which compared to the H6, which has a more traditional box design with 600 litres, which the H6GT is based on, is significantly less because of the sloping back end of the H6GT. But that's the price you pay for owning a coupe. Having said that though, there's still plenty of space back here to throw in a few large suitcases, and there's more space under the floor where you can also stow the cargo blind when it's not in use. The back seats are a 60-40 split, and they can be folded down by pushing the latches on the seat to increase space to 1,390 litres. All in all, for what this SUV is, you get decent space. Now it's time to get behind the wheel of this Chinese SUV and see whether it drives as well as it looks. So, driving the Haval H6GT Ultra. I must say, to this point, I've been properly impressed with everything that Haval has thrown into this mid-size SUV. It looks like a performance SUV, it even sounds like a performance SUV thanks to the bimodal exhaust in the back, but I think this car is more about the show and less about the go. And I say that because even though it has 150 kilowatts and 320 Newton meters of torque out of the 4-cylinder turbocharged 2-litre under the hood, it's only really good for about an 8.5 second run to 100 kilometers an hour. Now, that isn't too bad, but when you are driving this every day, and I've got this in race mode at the moment, and you put your foot into it, it makes a lot of noise. It does move, but it's certainly not quick. But that's okay, because this car isn't really about being a performance car, especially when you consider it costs around 46,000 Australian dollars brand new. And you can't expect that level of performance, or more performance than what we have under the hood of this thing, for that sort of money. Instead, what the Haval H6GT Ultra gives you is a mid-size SUV that is comfortable, packed full of features and technology, that looks the part of a performance SUV, that sounds the part of a performance SUV, that you can just enjoy every day. And for that, it's fine. You build speed, you get up to the speed limit, and you do it with a little bit of theatre. I think most people that get behind the wheel of this thing, that are looking for a mid-size SUV at this price point, are going to be properly thrilled with this thing. I like it even though it's not quick, and I think Haval's really done their market research with this thing to make sure that they cater for that bit of niche market segment that are looking for something that looks like this, something that looks like a performance SUV, but has everything that they're looking for without breaking the bank. So then we have the 7-speed dual clutch transmission in the H6GT, which to be honest with you works really, really well. Gear shifts are lightning quick regardless of whether you're going up or down. It does limit how far down you can go when you are rowing through gears though, which I imagine is a bit of a fail-safe to stop people like me from blowing up gearboxes, but even then it takes you down to the lowest gear that it thinks you can be in based on your speed, keeps you in the rev range. So from a performance perspective, even though this isn't really a full-blown performance car, it works fine. Now, there is a moment of hesitation when you first put this thing into drive or reverse, which is a common issue with DCTs, so no biggie overall. And the gearbox along with the engine works together to give you a 8.4 litre per 100 kilometre combined fuel consumption, which again for a car in this segment, being a mid-size SUV, isn't too bad at all. So overall, gearbox works fantastically. You've got paddle shifters on the steering wheel that also feel quite nice. And like I said, lightning quick, feels good. What more can you ask for? Suspension wise, this thing is set up brilliantly. And I say that because even though it is a touch sporty, it's still not uncomfortable. You can quite easily drive this down the highway and it just floats down the road. But bring it out to back roads like I'm on at the moment with potholes and undulations, cracks, uneven surfaces, and it does shine. It really manages its 1,600 kilogram weight around corners. Now, it does have a little bit of lean given it's a high riding SUV, so no surprises there. And it does understeer when you push it into a corner, which really is a hallmark of all-wheel drive cars that tend to understeer more than they oversteer. But it's manageable because the steering in this really communicates exactly what the front wheels are doing, so you know that, or you feel that point where you're about to lose grip. So from a steering point of view, even though there is a little bit of vagueness off center, it does change direction quite quickly. It's not a fast steering rack. It is an electric steering rack at the end of the day, but it works fine for what this SUV is. You do get a couple of different steering modes. I find Sport to be the best one to be in because it's not overly light, gives you enough stiffness, and really does add to giving you confidence when you are pushing this thing around a corner. I do find comfort and light modes are probably a bit too light for my own taste, as the names would suggest. So I find sport to be the best place to be. Now, brakes wise, you get 2 piston calipers up front, vented rotors, and single piston calipers on the back with solid rotors. And look, they work quite well because they give you confidence when you push into a corner to know that you can slow this 1600 kilogram SUV down, which in the grand scheme of things isn't exactly the lightest SUV out there. They're progressive, there's no initial grab or bite point, so it's not uncomfortable. All in all, I think brakes, steering, and suspension are really what makes this car, from a performance point of view, a lot of fun to drive because, let's face it, the engine doesn't really have a hell of a lot of power and it's not exactly about straight line speed, as I mentioned earlier. But with this suspension, steering, and braking setup, you can certainly have a bit of fun. Now, in terms of interior quality and comfort, there might be people out there thinking it's a Chinese SUV, it must be full of rattles and creaks, but let me tell you, it is not. This thing is so well put together. I find myself looking around and just thinking, how in the world did Haval manage to give us all of this and everything works for the price point of 46,000 Australian dollars? And look, I know I've said that quite a few times throughout this video, but it shocks me each and every time. Now, the one thing I will say is that there is a little bit of wind noise that comes through, a smidge of tire noise, but it's not annoying, doesn't really impact the overall driving experience in here because you can stick it into normal and just cruise down the road. Like I said, it's comfortable, the seats are fantastic, they keep you in place quite nicely, being they're a bit more sporty. The one thing I will say though is that visibility in here isn't the greatest because the back window, thanks to that sloping tailgate, is a bit narrower, so if you do have a car behind you, expect just to see the windscreen. But in a world where most people are driving SUVs anyway, the reality is you'll probably see someone behind you in an SUV, so you won't have any issues. Visibility through all the other windows though is perfectly fine. It's just that back window that's a little bit narrower. All in all, I think the interior quality, the levels of comfort in here are phenomenal. And lastly, we have all the safety assistance tech in here, which is brilliant. Now, Haval's really paid attention to the smaller details because this thing, as an example, will pick up the difference between a broken line and a solid line on the road, and it will show you that on your heads-up display and instrument cluster. And it works really well. It works in real time. I've tested this out. It'll also pick up curbs and denote those with a slimmer line, so you know there's a curb there. And what I really like is that this thing doesn't just show you what's in front of you when you're cruising down the highway, it'll show you what's beside you as well. So all you see on your instrument cluster are these cars dancing in and out of your lane, which is a pretty cool little feature. I'm a big fan. Now, in terms of how everything works well. Adaptive cruise control works, brings you a full stop, and it'll keep going when traffic starts moving in front of you. The lane keeping is okay. Now, you do need to be here and helping it navigate around tighter curves. It does steer for you, but at the end of the day, we're not talking about autonomous systems here. So it's been developed to make sure that you're still here paying attention, hanging onto the steering wheel, helping it navigate around curves. And from that sense, it works. And like I said, it's got everything else in here. Rear cross traffic alert, the 360-degree camera system in here is phenomenal. The 3D view is brilliant. It's so intuitive because depending on which way you're going, the car will rotate the angle so you have the best possible view when you're trying to maneuver this car around. So they've thought about the little things, and I love that. And I've said it, like I said, quite a few times in this video, but it just shocks me that they've managed to put all of this into this for 46,000 Australian dollars. It's mind-blowing. Gets to me every time. So, the H6GT Ultra is definitely a surprising SUV in most ways when you consider how affordable it is. And like I said, it looks and sounds more the part of a performer than it actually is, but it doesn't really matter because the proof is in the pudding, as they say, and the fact that these things are so popular really says it all. And if you've watched this video to this point, but you're still thinking this is a cheap Chinese SUV, then my advice is to take one for a test drive because I think you're in for a shock. Because this Haval is a comfortable, spacious, and technology-packed mid-size SUV that has the looks and is a touch sporty, which is exactly what most people out there are looking for. And with a 7-year unlimited kilometer warranty, a 5-year cap price servicing program, and 5 years roadside assistance, it makes a sweet deal even sweeter. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and consider subscribing to the channel. and I'll see you next time.